Hi, I'm Rashida Dow, and today I'm interviewing Kyle and Mel Bailey of thebaileysgo.com about their decision to quit their jobs and travel the world for a year. We're talking about the choices they made along the way before they got here. We're going to talk about the choices they're making on the road, and I'm really excited to get their couple story about taking a gap year together. So make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be notified when I post the next video. Hi, Kyle. Hi, Mel. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Rashida. Thanks for having us.
Glad to have you here. Glad to talk to a couple who's doing this. It's so exciting. I know a lot of people, I see a lot of people, and talk to a lot of single women on this kind of journey, but it's rare to get a couple. So I feel like I won the lottery today. All right, so let's start at the beginning for people who don't know you. At the end of the year last year, both of you left home to take a trip around the world of a year or maybe more. What was your life like before you made the decision to do this?
We had regular corporate jobs. I worked from home on my computer, on my laptop already. In a role I didn't like and doing work I didn't like, and then you commuted to work.
Yeah, and then I was the person with like the typical long commute, so I had to drive an hour to work every day, work long hours sometimes and all of that. So we both had pretty normal jobs that you would consider like for today's corporate environment.
But we also were saving for a long time, and because we first got out of debt, so we did live like super minimally compared to like our salary brackets. So we had one car because I was working from home because it was easier I don't need a car, and since you commuted.
Yeah.
Little stuff like that helped us save.
Okay. You're living your life, you're saving your money. What are you saving for?
For the trip specifically, so once we got out of debt, we did start saving for retirement and doing all those kind of typical things. But then at some point, we can never remember, we talk about it a lot, but we don't remember when we made the decision that we were gonna go, but we went through, we did the math, we did the numbers and everything, and so we just set a goal of what we wanted to save, and so that's what we were saving for, was specifically for the trip.
It was a little bit of transition though. So when we got out of debt at the end of 2017, then we started like going on trips, hanging out, spending more money because we were out of debt and our budget loosened up. But then we were like, wait, now we want to do this, tighten the budget back up, and then continue saving so we could quit.
You talked about not remembering how all of this kind of came about, but do you remember who suggested the idea of taking a break and traveling?
I would have to say it's got to be Melanie.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna take credit. I don't remember specifically, but I'm gonna take credit because I started looking at a lot of YouTube, and I saw a lot more people doing something similar. So there's a lot of I started following a lot of couples, and then they were quitting their jobs and traveling, and I said, well, I want to quit my job and travel too. And then I don't know when we made the decision, but I'm going to take credit for the idea.
Okay. Now, Melanie had the idea. Was it hard to talk Kyle into it, or was he like, yes, let's do this?
It wasn't hard to talk me into it, but I would say that it was something I had to think about a lot more, I guess, because I hadn't already, dove into the YouTube web, dark web or whatever, if you will, of all the people that were doing it. So for me, it was kind of an unfamiliar idea at first, but the more we sat down and talked about it and watched things, and I'm kind of the money person in terms of like doing planning and budgeting and all of that. We work on everything together, but just in terms of really trying to put it all on paper, I'm the person that usually does that type of stuff. So once we started talking about it and looking at it, it was really feasible and realistic to make it happen. So it was just kind of like, why not?
So when Melanie first mentioned it, were your only hesitations around money, or were there other concerns that you had?
For me, just money.
For Melanie, it was definitely her money, because she already made up her mind, hey, yeah, like let's really do this and make it happen. For me, what I found was, and I find it with a lot of people that we talk to about it too, as the man, it's kind of a weird thing to be like, throw all of this away, quote unquote, and like go and do something that doesn't, I guess, equate to the idea of building something, right? Like, so as a man, it's like, oh, you hold the house to hold down, you get a career, you know, you save some money,
So, like,
you know,
security.
all that kind of stuff in terms of security. Like, as a man, like, security is kind of that thing, and this is in some ways a complete opposite of that ideology. So I kind of had to work through in my head, like, what is being secure really? What does that really mean? But after I got through all of those thoughts and everything, and I mean, to be frank, I mean, you could call them fears, right? After you get through all of that stuff, it becomes real simple. You know, it's like, hey, we got plans, and we're gonna execute them, and it just works that way. So it took a little bit for me, but we got there, I would say, in a relatively short period of time.
Okay, so this one's for Kyle, because I hardly ever talk to guys doing this. You talked about the fears. What helped you get past those fears? That I'm not building, you know, for the future fear.
A big part of it is that what we're doing now is going to be a part of our future. It's a part of our story. It's part of my story. It's part of her story. And, you know, it's cliche, you know, to be like, oh, you know, what do you want your story to read like? Or, you know, how do you want to remember what you did and all those types of things. But when you really start to think about, is this really going to change much in the big scheme of things? So if we stay out here for a year, or if we stay out here for 5 years, in the big scheme of things later down the road, how big of an impact is that really going to be, you know, in terms of whether it's positive or negative? And in my mind, it far outweighs any negatives in terms of, oh, I took a year off from my career and all those types of things. Because, I mean, after you work in corporate for a while, you see it. You see, you know, people come and go. You see people that retire there. You see people that work somewhere for a year. I've seen people at the company I was at leave, go work for another company and come back. So it's kind of like, it'll be there. A lot of those things that we kind of hang on or stay attached to, it'll be there when it's time to come back, or if you choose to come back. So knowing that allowed me to more free myself up and say, I'm the one with the flexibility, you know, the control around my life with what I want to do. And kind of those corporate things or those structural things that you tend to hold on to, it'll be there if I choose to go back to it.
I don't find a lot of people as confident in their ability to return as you are. But I'm wondering if that is because I talk to a lot of women, and we have different fears about, especially single women who have fears about like not being able to come back and get a job. But you seem, I think of all the women I've talked to, it's been very few that have said like, oh, I'm not worried about that because I know I can get a job. And so it's really nice to hear you say that, because I always feel like that's not something that should hold us back, because if you got a job once, you can get a job again. It may take a little bit more time, but you know.
Yeah, it might take some time and all of that, but I mean, as far as the planning and everything goes, you know, we have an emergency fund, all those different types of things. So we didn't necessarily go the traditional like YouTuber route, like, oh, I just had money in my account and I just said, forget the world, we're going away. Like, we planned this out for a while. So a lot of that helps as well. So it's not like we're out here, you know, without a safety net, or, you know, living life on the edge, so to speak, waiting for where the next check is going to come from and all that. So that helps as well to be like, hey, we can go out and do this and come back and figure things out along the way.
I think, like, to add, I know you were asking about Kyle, but to add, like, I was never scared about getting another job, because I always figured that I don't like my current job, or I didn't like my current job. I can always come back and get another terrible job. Like, terrible jobs on every corner. Whether it's what I want to do, or whether it's more like labor intensive, or maybe, you know, terrible hours. I don't like it now. I can come back and get a job I don't like.
That's the best attitude. And I've had that conversation with people too. Like, why are you holding on to it so tightly to a job you don't like? Like, what's the point? Like,
Exactly.
Did you have anyone try to talk you out of taking this journey?
No. Everybody, for the most part, and I wrote about this in our story on our website, but like, I think our position was, why not? Because we didn't have a house. Once we got out of debt, our bills are significantly cheaper. I mean, as long as 2 adults can come up with enough money to eat and sleep, we didn't have like high expenses. We don't have children. So that wasn't like an extra factor to think about. Like, so what about your kids? What are you going to do with them? They need things. We don't have any of those like complications, I would say, or extra steps to think about.
Yeah.
So when our lease was up and we had the money, it was really kind of felt like, why not? Like a lot of our family and friends were like, why not? Because we'll never be not this free, but like this young, this healthy, child free forever.
And the other thing that I think played into that too, just from our history, let's say, so my father, he works for an airline company, and so one of the benefits, that everybody who travels is aware of, when you have a family member, you could fly for free or whatever. So I did a lot of traveling when I was younger, and my family is from Jamaica, so even just going to visit family there, or family in other places in general, but just I did a lot of traveling growing up. And then even Melanie, when we were in school, she did a semester at sea, right? You go all over the place. And so the passion or the want to continue to travel or to continue, seeing new places and all of that isn't something new for either one of us. So it wasn't like we were coming and saying, hey, we're going to sell all our stuff and go, be monks in Tibet or something like that. It was, hey, we're going to continue doing something that we've always been doing. It's just, to the next level, I guess you could say.
It's funny, I talk to people all the time who are concerned about what their family is going to say. But every time I talk to someone who's had the conversation, they're like, no, it's fine. Like they weren't surprised. Like if you're the kind of person that will take off for a year to go do whatever you want to do, your family's not going to be that shocked. You've probably been that person for a long time.
And if you have a plan, I think it's nothing to be scared about. I'm sure, our families they believe that we thought about it, that we planned for it, and that the biggest part is that we saved for it.
Some people do.
So what are you going to do about the money? Yeah. What are you going to do? Like, why are you care about what's going on in my pockets? Like the people who weren't immediately supportive were like, what are you going to do about money? Make it.
When that happens, all you hear is like fear.
Yeah.
So nobody's never, it's not that anybody, not to say nobody's ever against you per se, but a lot of people, even when you get, let's say, a relatively negative reaction or whatever you want to call it, it's just people putting their fears on you, projecting their fears, or like they don't understand or don't know how it works. So if you've always had like a job, right, and you get insurance through your job, the prospect of, so how does that work? It's like, no, you can go and get travel insurance and get health insurance to support you without working for a big company or do whatever. Or just like, what are you gonna do if X, Y, Z happens? Like, what if you get in a car accident or something? It's like the same thing that happens everywhere else. Matter of fact, it might be cheaper depending on where it is, right? So like,
or I think people have inflated like perceptions of the rest of the world, like everyone else is more dangerous. Like we've heard a million times, Brazil is so dangerous or Colombia is so dangerous, and it's like,
I mean, stuff happens everywhere.
This
is a lot of people. Yeah, that's all you hear after a while. So at first, for a lot of people, and going back to like advice, right? Or like you said, most people, if you're the type of person to take off, people will understand. But even if they don't, I would say a lot of the times it's not that somebody's against you or like, you shouldn't do it or whatever. Or even if somebody is trying to talk you out of it, quote unquote, it's a lot of the time it's just people don't understand that they have fears. Like people fear what they don't know, don't understand, or think that's not for them. So now it's not for you or whatever. But like, I don't think it always comes from a place of
like everybody's not a hater.
Yeah, like hate or like somebody trying to get against. But a lot of people just
are scared.
They're scared of things that they don't understand.
And it might be well intentioned, right? Yeah. So fear is like, I don't want something to happen to you. Yeah. Brazil and Colombia is so dangerous. I don't want something to happen to you, or whatever. Like, I mean, it might not be like, I don't want you to go, but it's dangerous. You shouldn't go, or you're not gonna have any money. And then what? We're gonna come back home and figure it out. Work. Like,
be normal, I guess.
It's not gonna go straight to like homelessness overnight.
So,
Okay. A lot of people dream about doing what you're doing. What was the thing that got you out the door saying like, we're definitely doing this?
Let's see. I think between the two of us, and I'll let Melanie talk specifically if she wants, but between the two of us, I know for me as well, I think we just kept having a lot of, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back. Like there was like a series of events or things that happened like at work or whatever, maybe where it's just like it was more motivation to save. So when you say what made us finally do it, right, we could have just kept saving and then never actually executed and just had a ton of money to invest or something like that. But along the way while we were saving, it was just like a series of things that would happen at work or something like that, where it was just more motivation to be like, all right, we really gotta get out of here now. It was kind of like, hey, this is another sign that we're doing the right thing or going in the right direction, whether it was, whether it's an issue with a manager, coworker, projects, hours, whatever it might be. It was just kind of like one thing after another is just like confirmation, exactly where it's like, yeah, no, this is what we need to do and go this direction.
That's cool. Okay, so let's talk money for a second. When you were planning this, how did you figure out how much money you wanted to save?
So starting with a whole bunch of research. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard about Nomadic Matt's book on how to live for or how to travel for $50 a day around the world. So started, reading that, started like researching, just looking up flights like in my spare time, because once I started chilling at home, I would look on flights, I'd be on Skyscanner, I'd look on Airbnbs, I'll look at like expat forums and just think about like how much does it really take. And then I think because we're two people, everything is not double the cost. Like, yeah, flights are double the cost, but like our Airbnb is our Airbnb. I mean, one bedroom Airbnb, you go sleep in it. So it's not exactly twice as much to cost. So then we just multiply by like 1.5, all of the like solo travel blogs that I read about, how much does it really take, and not assuming just like super backpacker budget. So I also added in a little bit more because we're not super backpackers. We're on a budget, but not super tight.
Yeah, like we don't plan to sleep in, 12-person bed hostels like in one room.
Yeah,
it's not our jam. Like, and I think that's what helped us a lot with the money, is just being realistic about, the types of accommodations or where we want to stay and all that kind of stuff. So and Melanie did a lot of that research. They said she's the research queen. So then once we kind of got that together, and she said, oh, it would take, X amount in these different places. So we also looked at, hey, where would we want to go in the span of a year, right? Because that's important. You can't go everywhere. And so we looked at where we want to go, and when she came up with an idea on that budget in that area, we kind of came out for an estimate of, okay, by the time we add some flights on top of that, getting in between the different places, that's where I kind of take over and go, okay, well, this is our current budget with how much we make right now. This is how much we spend. This is how much we have extra, and kind of put the timeline together to say, okay, this is how long it's going to take us to save. This is the date where we can put in that 2-week notice and start the countdown and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So that other people can get an idea of what this might look like for them, do you mind sharing how much money you saved for this trip yourself?
For the trip specifically, I want to say we did about 45,000, not including our emergency fund, our savings. We also have a good amount of points. We probably have like 500,000 in airline points.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So we factored that in as well. Like our first flight, we did on points to South America to begin with from the US. So including our 500,000 points in airline, plus the 45, and we also have an additional like emergency fund, or if we had to go back home, we could get an apartment, get a little something car, and hold us over until we had to get jobs.
Yeah, and then I mean the other thing too, kind of backtracking a little bit, but just in terms of what we also saved for. On top of that, we did put away a little bit of money, so we do have like travelers insurance and health insurance and that type of stuff. So a lot of that we did pay for up front before we left, and also our first big trip that we did down in Patagonia, a lot of those accommodations and all of those things were paid for before we left for the trip. So things that we knew we could do in advance or pay for in advance, we did that as a part of our normal income outside of that $45,000.
It's probably closer to 50 then.
Yeah, it's probably closer to the 50 range. Yeah.
Okay. That is a very healthy number. So how long are you hoping that $45,000-$50,000 lasts you?
Just on savings, we wanted to make a year.
Yeah, we planned it
Okay.
for the year, but we also aren't good at not doing some type of work or
Oh yeah.
getting some kind of
We
income.
also want to make money.
Yeah, so we don't really plan on just like chilling for the entire year and saying, oh, like make it stretch at the end or anything like that. So, but to answer your question, yeah, about a year is what we plan on that to last for us.
But you're also open to this break being longer than a year.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, we are. We don't know where it will take us, but yeah, we're open to it.
We're open to the digital nomad life that's on Instagram.
Okay. What was the hardest thing for you guys to give up individually when you started saving? When you were in that 14-month stretch, what was the hardest thing for you?
For me, I'm a big automotive enthusiast, and I used to my car. So we used to have two cars. The reason we didn't wasn't because like we sold one or anything like that. I mean, which we eventually did, but the car that I drove, my commute was crazy. It was like a little over 100 miles like every day, like closer to probably like 110 miles. Like I drove an hour each way to work every day. And so I put a ton of miles on this car that I loved. You know, I did stuff to it and all that, but that all kind of came to an end because I was putting so many miles on it, and because we started saving money. So certain things might break or whatever, and it's like, nope, ain't fixing it. Like it's in run it into the ground mode. And so it sounds crazy because it's like a material thing, but I enjoy driving. So like I never had a problem like driving an hour commute. I'm like a road trip person, like the whole nine. So for me, driving is just something I enjoy, and just doing stuff to your car and those types of things, or even the maintenance, like basic maintenance. I used to wash the car like twice a week. Like it's just my thing, I guess, or whatever, right? And so giving that up and just kind of like, running into the ground and all that kind of stuff, that was kind of hard to do. Not because necessarily I was attached to it, but a lot of it just has to do with like my personality and all that kind of stuff. So like the maintenance, the upkeep, the cleaning and all that stuff, that follows through cleaning in the kitchen, through clothing, like all that kind of stuff. So it was just a part of my personality that was like conflicting with that, I guess.
And he didn't like my car. Once his car broke down, then it was like, okay, well, you can drive my car to work, obviously, because I don't need my car. And then he didn't like it.
Okay, so I'll cut this out. But what was your car, Kyle, and what was your car, Mel?
So I had a Volkswagen GTI, and then she had a Dodge Caliber. They don't even make it anymore. Like it was horrible. Like,
I mean, I kept my car since college. That was the car I bought like sophomore year in school. So it was,
it had nothing to do with it being old. Like this is just a poorly designed vehicle. There's a reason they don't make it anymore. Like it didn't have a tack, like to tell the engines. Like it was.
I didn't have leather seats and all the fancy that you had.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nonetheless, like that was, I don't know, that hurt my soul when it was time to like give it up.
When you had to drive my car.
Yeah.
You made it. You sacrificed. That's what that 14 months was about. Okay. So Mel,
because it's like there's still a sacrifice to make it now.
You don't drive now.
Yeah, I don't drive now. So that's really weird. Like not driving now, like is even a weird thing because I actually like driving. So like it's just weird in general. But yeah. What about you?
Oh, what I had to give up in those 14 months.
Yeah.
I think it kind of relates to the car because sometimes, because I did work from home, I was always in the house because I didn't really go anywhere. And so like I would drive myself crazy being in the house at a job I don't like, and then like waiting for Kyle to get home, like, come talk to me, or like be at the door, like ready for him to come home to like hang out with me, have fun with me, because it wasn't like I can go, even down to like going out to lunch because I didn't have a car. I mean, I would Uber sometimes, but try not to Uber too much. So maybe the car, and then like going out to eat. I like to go out to eat.